Welcome to the LowCarbMD podcast. No one is beyond help. No one is beyond hope.
As we have always said, we are bringing you medical information and cutting-edge science, but none of this is medical advice. Please seek out input from your own doctor. Hi guys, welcome to this is going to be a really special episode of the LowCarbMD podcast. We get to talk with the originators, the guys who really inspired us to get started. Well, I'm going to say the guy, and I have a great special guest interviewer, Amy Eiges, our program director here. And I'm excited for this. We're going to talk about Carl Franklin, one of the Keto Dudes. If you've been living under the rock, he's under the acclaimed Two Keto Dudes podcast. There we go. Keep calm and keto on. He also helped set up one of the original keto conferences, Ketofest up in Connecticut, which my practice and myself, we will be there to support them. Very excited about that, and that will be in July. So that's coming up very, very soon. Get your tickets. Remind me the website, Carl, again, for
Ketofest.com.
Perfect. There you go. So we'll be there. Amy will be there. A lot of people from our practice will be there. Nina Teitschultz, a lot of other people. It's going to be fun. So let's get right into it. Carl, if you
Sure.
The place I wanted to start with is one, I think the things we talked about right before we hit record was, let's talk about things that really aren't talked about in low carb. One, vaccine hesitancy, and this topic of vaccine hesitancy. I don't think I've heard a low carb podcast tackle it. Let's talk about the weight gain that's happened in the past 2 years, and the shame and the guilt and the feelings associated with that. And then but before we get there, I want to hear more about you and how you came to be, the Ketofest, Two Keto Dudes guy. How did that start? So I think
it started with diabetes, as it usually does. Yeah. I had in 2015, towards the end of 2015, I had a diagnosis of type 2 diabetes. My A1C was up in the 7th. And Richard, the guy who I started the podcast with, Richard Morris, his A1C when he started the ketogenic diet, which was a few years before, was over 10. And he was in danger of losing a toe. And he basically became my guru. And it's weird because we're in a weird family. Richard hired my friend, Mark Miller, and was from this company that he started. He didn't start it, but the company that he, was working for. And Mark Miller got cancer, prostate cancer. And so he was doing research and asking Richard about, keto for cancer. And he found Dom D'Agostino's research and all of this stuff with the combination of a ketogenic diet and exogenous ketones and hyperbaric chamber therapy. And Mark was able to reduce the size of his tumors to practically nothing. By the time he went under the knife, there was practically nothing there. And so anyway, but when he started this, Mark and his wife, Karen, were neighbors of mine. They were, I actually got them together on another podcast. So it's a weird family thing, right? We all know each other. So they said, yeah, Richard Morris is my guru. And I said, well, you guys are doing it. I'm going to do it. Richard was happy to send me all this research and papers and videos, starting with videos, that I could really understand and dissect. And then I went back in the papers and learned how to read papers and things. And within the year, I had lost 80 pounds and got my A1C down to 5 something and, became non-diabetic and just happy as a clam. And so during that process, we just in 2016, right at the beginning, a few weeks after I had started the ketogenic diet, we started the Two Keto Dudes podcast. And so it chronicled my journey. And also along the way, we talked to a lot of experts, and it just took off. It was a timing thing. I think there wasn't There was Jimmy Moore's podcast, which I had listened to and got some good information from. There weren't too many other ones. And so this, the word keto was not really understood by people. And so, we sort of were there at the right time, and we just grew. And so then at a certain point in 2017, I'm a software developer. So I go to conferences and I speak at conferences all the time. And the best part of conferences for me, yeah, the talks are great. But the best part is the social aspect of it, the talking in the halls, the conversations that happen over lunch or dinner or in the bar after or whatever, the in between, in the speaker's lounge, you'd have these great conversations. You'd learn a lot. So that kind of thing was at the conference was something that gave me the idea of Ketofest. What if we did a keto festival? Conferences are conferences are for professionals. Festivals are for people. So let's have just as much emphasis on the social aspect of it that as we do on the science aspect of it. And so that's how Ketofest started. And it became a real kind of community thing where people felt this is one place where, people who are obese, but on a ketogenic journey can feel comfortable with themselves and with everybody else and learn a whole lot and have a whole lot of great food in the process.
Yeah, it's Amy's told me about it, and we wanted to go, but then certainly the pandemic kind of halted that.
Yeah.
And it's been 2 years I've been waiting, so I'm excited this year to go. We'll have a table there, which is going to be fun.
Mm-hmm.
I can't wait I've seen pictures. Siobhan Huggins, Dave Feldman told me it's a blast.
It is.
So we're really excited. Amy, you were there back in 2019, right?
I was there twice. I was there 2018 and 2019. I was there with Nina at the Nutrition Coalition. But it actually going on in 2018, it would kind of change the trajectory of my life in a lot of ways. First of all, it helped me meet so many people that I had been meeting and talking to online. I got to meet them in person, and they became good friends and supporters in my own ketogenic life and journey. And then I met Nina Teichol's there, and we ended up talking and chatting, and I ended up working for her for many years. So yeah, so, and then that led me to work with her, and then now with Trev. So it did change the trajectory of my life in so many ways. But
Wow.
But it is also, I talk a lot about how I don't speak science, and it really helped. Some of the lectures and some of the information given was given in such a way that I was able to understand it even further. And then also, as you said, like what happens outside of the speeches and the presentations is also as important, right? There's the vendors and the interesting information and the sort of side conversations that happen are so valuable.
Right.
And just feeling like, so many of us, and you kind of alluded to it before, but so many of us are outliers in this world. It's still, keto is trendy, but we go to our own houses or, with our families and friends, and they're like, what are you still doing that weird thing?
Yeah.
The weird keto diet.
Yeah.
And it's nice to be an entire town take over, where, you don't have to kind of, explain why you're getting your bunless burger or explain all the things and,
or just little details, right? Like I went to a Mexican restaurant the other day, and they have these Baja fish tacos. And I said, look, I don't want any starch. I don't want any sugar. So, put it on coleslaw, grill it instead of breading it and deep frying it, put the sauce on, that's okay. And that's it. And it came, and they were like, yeah, no problem. And it was really good, but it came with a pile of rice. It's like, just details, when you go to a restaurant where they understand what keto is, they won't ask you if you want bread. They just not bring it.
We should say that you have done arrangements for the weekend of Ketofest for some of the local restaurants to be ready for, have menu items that are really keto and low carb friendly. And you've kind of taken care of a lot of those details, so we don't have to think about it.
Exactly.
And it's really a luxury because, as you said, you go to a restaurant, it's like, I'll have this on the side and this, deconstruct everything, and you've taken care of a lot of those details.
Isn't it nice to go to a restaurant and one of the appetizers is a pint glass of bacon?
It's bacon, but served on the menu. So
right. Yeah.
It's awesome.
I think to focus in on the social aspect, which is so key, forming those bonds. We talked a little bit about off the air how this community is, a lot of people are alone. A lot of people may feel shame and guilt. A lot of people may be contrarian thinkers, their families already don't like them, and, for thinking differently anyway. And, it's funny, you mentioned how kind of society biases against us. I was at Burger King the other day getting hamburger patties, and the teller asked me, like, what are you feeding your dog? That was the comment, right? So like, no, I'm not feeding my dog, I'm feeding myself. But events like this, I really look forward to, because you just get to connect with people. And I think those connections foster so many good things. And in fact, there's evidence that was published in the New England Journal several years back, about 7 years back, showing that, weight loss is spreads through social networks, and obesity likewise spreads through social networks. So meeting people just like you on the same journey, I think it's so important. I can't wait to go to Ketofest.
Well, here's the thing about Ketofest now, because we haven't had one since 2019, right? Pandemic and whatever. And so during the pandemic, a lot of people gained weight who had been successful with keto. Some may have just put on a few pounds. Some may have gained all their weight back, right? And so that the sense of shame and self-judgment or judgment from others keeps them quiet. Like, you don't see them on social media anymore. You don't see them. They're not out being social because they're not taking pictures of themselves because they don't like the way they look, and they feel somebody's going to comment, oh, that keto stuff doesn't work. See, right? Where in fact, it's because of the absence of keto that it didn't work, or they're eating too much or whatever. I'm in that camp. I mean, I put on half my weight that I lost with the ketogenic diet after 2019 during the pandemic. And yeah, some of it was just eating too much keto food, but some of it was cheating, because that's what a lot of people have done. And I was one of them. And so I'm crawling my way back down the scale, and blood sugar is good. Blood sugar is fine, but crawling my way back down the scale slowly. So I'm going to be at Ketofest 2022. And if I can do it, at being the weight I am and, as obese as I am, still I'm on my journey. And this is a place where the one place you can go where you won't be judged and you won't be shamed, and you can be with other people who are in various places on their keto journey. I mean, this is for life, there's ups, there's downs, but keto is for life. For me, there's no choice, because the alternative is death, quite frankly, early death from diabetes and complications thereof. So I just wanted to say that, if you're on the fence about coming to Ketofest because you're feeling the shame of being, gaining weight, this is the one place where you can come and be with other people who are probably in the same boat as you. And, there's no shame, there's no guilt. Yeah, somebody will, every once in a while, we had somebody like drive by, take pictures and post it on social media. Look at all those fatties.
You're kidding me.
Oh yeah, we had that. I think it was the first one, 2017.
You're joking. That's terrible.
Oh yeah, but I mean, this is what you get, I give the example of my friend Tom Seast. Tom lost 290, 300 pounds. He doesn't know how much he weighed, but he estimates it was over 500, 600 pounds. And he lost 300 and he's still obese. So people look at him and they say, oh yeah, that keto's working real good for you. Actually, it is.
I think the shame and the self-judgment, people don't realize the guilt, the shame, the pressures, the weight stigma,
Yeah.
Really, it leads to loneliness. It leads to
Depression.
Yeah, depression. It leads to withdrawing, when in fact the cure in that moment is the exact opposite. It's like, reach out for help, go talk to people, laugh. When you withdraw, that loneliness is also it's a stress, right? We all get, when we all get together and when we shake hands, all right, in a month or so, right, and we all laugh, right, what do we get?
Troy,
we get
you're
happy
getting
hormones.
a hug, just saying.
Yeah. So what do we get? We get a bunch of happy hormones, right? We get a bunch of we get stress relief, right, which is exactly what that lonely, shameful person needs, right, that guilt-ridden person needs. And it's like we all need that support, and to keep us on our journeys, right? So I'm a big believer in abolishing that shame and the guilt, taking it and putting it aside and coming together. And that's one thing Amy's done so well in our practice. She has pushed us, and Amy, I'd love for you to comment, but she has pushed us to think about how we can connect people more aggressively, right? How we can connect people so that nobody is alone.
Yeah, just going back to that, I'm so glad that you mentioned the judgment and shame a piece of this, and how people are sort of coming out of 2 years of being isolated. And, I am very vocal about some of my own vulnerabilities in this weight loss journey. And mostly because, I'm not somebody that's public with my most vulnerable moments, but I feel like there's so much out there that's like, oh, I went keto and I'm just all solved, I'm all cured. And that's not the experience for all of us. So I love that you're kind of addressing it head on and letting people know that they, that judgment and shame just does not serve anybody. And it's so inherent in some of the diet culture that we all think it's our go-to to kind of think it's going to help us, spur us on to greater health. And it never does. It only serves the opposite. It only makes us more isolated, more miserable. And that isolation and misery just, leads to just a terrible path. And as Tro said, we really, here, we developed a whole app around, basically because we wanted a place for people to have a community and support each other. I'm so glad that you are addressing it just head on,
absolutely.
Come, don't be judged, just connect.
Right.
I want to commend you for that social, creating these social events. They're not easy. Sometimes they're even money losing event. People don't understand, when we, in 2020, we were setting up a conference here at Low Carb New York, and we lost money. I mean, we had to close up everything. It's not easy to organize this. It's a huge undertaking. So I'm happy
we're probably going to lose money if we don't get any more orders. You
heard that, guys? Sign up, ketofest.com. Come join us.
Flights and hotels are 2 to 3 times what they normally are. Wow. And we have to pay that for the speakers,
That's I mean, I don't think people realize how hard it is. So we're excited to support you, and hopefully we'll certainly be there. And
especially if you get people coming from New York, they don't, they can just come up on the train and go back. They don't have to pay hotels or whatever. Yeah,
we're driving up, we're driving up. So we can't wait. We can't wait to be there.
Why don't you give people a list of who's going to be speaking?
Yes. I'm so glad you asked. So first up is Dave Feldman. And Dave, you've probably talked to him on your podcast before.
Yeah, we worked on a paper together. Yeah, we just published our paper not too long ago, 6 months ago, most widely cited in American Society of Nutrition. Most widely shared. Yeah,
that's right. And so this is his first talk since that, and he's doing a talk called "A New Fleet of Boats: The Lipid Energy Model Simplified." And here is his abstract. The lipid energy model is finally published. That's what you were just talking about. In this talk, we'll focus on core components of the model, particularly on a ketogenic diet. We cover why carbohydrate restriction matters the dynamics of mobilizing fat, and how all these factors can influence cholesterol levels. Dave, I think, is like the Galileo Galilei of lipids, isn't he? I mean, he's discovered a model that nobody understands yet, you know?
Not only doesn't understand, is it despite us bringing it, so cardiologists asked, where's the data? So I went to Dave 2 years ago and I said, Dave, we got to put this out there. We had patients who had very high LDLs on a low carb diet, who had lost a ton of weight, very lean, add back just a tiny amount of carbs, and their LDLs plummeted.
Yeah.
Right. Just a tiny bit. I'm not telling everybody to do what we did here in the clinic.
Right.
It was very supervised, medically supervised, calcium scores, testing. So I told him we got to publish this. This was 3 years ago, actually. And at the time he had his data set, and it wasn't, no cardiologist knew anything about this. And certainly he was the pioneer. And I said, we got to put it in there for cardiologists. In fact, over the last 2 years, cardiologists like Ethan Weiss and Thomas Dayspring said, we need more information.
Yeah.
Right. So we finally published this, the 600 people from his survey, the people from my clinic. We put it all together. Nick Norwitz, David Ludwig worked together. We published this.
Big deal.
Dr. Adrian Soto. So we had a lot of people work together, and it came out, it was fantastic. And you know what those cardiologists said? They said, this is nothing, right? This is worthless. And by the way, and they said, this is an embarrassment.
Wow.
Thomas Dayspring said, this is an embarrassment, just to give you an idea of.
And of course, he couldn't give you any science to back up his position.
No, there's no science. It's, I don't like you. So, so there's, Dave has patiently worked, and he's still patiently worked. He's my hero. I got to be honest with you.
Mine too. Yeah.
He's one of my heroes. So I'm excited for that. Who else is on? Who else is presenting?
All right. So next is L. Amber O'Hearn, who's doing a talk on ketogenic diet, sleep, and satiety. So it's all about how sleep and metabolism are tightly connected, in part because hunger and wakefulness have overlapping mechanisms biochemically. In this talk, I'll go over experimental data. This is first person, Amber. I will go over experimental data showing what ketogenic diet do to sleep quality and quantity, and how that might relate to some of their therapeutic benefits. Some questions I will address are how satiety and sleep quality interact. What is the relationship between sleep deprivation and ketogenic diets, and why the same intervention appears to help both narcolepsy, a disease of inability to stay awake, and depression, a disease often associated with oversleeping. I really need to watch this because I notice if my CPAP mask leaks the next day, I just feel terrible, and it shows in my blood sugar. It's funny.
Absolutely, but a lot of people don't realize that on a CGM, you can see that I'd say about 10% of glycemia is related to sleep and sleep quality. Yeah. If you back out dietary carbohydrates, I'd say it's like 50% of glycemic variability. And I know my good friend is going to be talking about lipedema, and I cannot wait. I cannot wait to see. She did a great conference, and I'm interested to see. I think she's up next, right?
Yeah. Siobhan Huggins, lipedema, not lipidemia, but lipedema, what it looks like and how keto might help. And here's her abstract. Lipedema is a frequently painful disorder affecting the fat and lymphatics and almost exclusively impacts women. Despite not being an uncommon disorder, it is frequently underdiagnosed or misdiagnosed as simple obesity. This talk will walk through the telltale signs of lipedema, what it looks and feels like, and how to differentiate it from obesity. Along the way, a model of what may cause lipedema will be discussed, as well as how a ketogenic diet may be uniquely suited for management, reducing pain, and improving quality of life in those with lipedema.
That's going to be awesome.
How many people do you think are misdiagnosed percentage-wise as just plain Jane obese when they have, in fact, lipedema?
Oh, it's insane. This is probably one of the most missed diagnoses related to, I'd say causally related to obesity. You know, we've seen patients with biopsies kind of with fibrotic lipid, you know, fibrotic fat even, and completely, you know, shamed and blamed that they're not dieting hard enough.
Right.
So this is very, very interesting and, you know, very important. I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, I can't either. These are three stellar talks.
And you have two of my heroes coming up. I know, like legit two of my heroes.
Yeah. The
Eric
OG.
Westman and Nina Teicholz. So what are they going to be talking about?
So Dr. Eric Westman, first of all, there's a theme to Ketofest this year, which is fat is good for the heart. And so it's a bold statement, right? So Dr. Eric Westman, his talk is called Keto Reverses Heart Failure. No minced words about this, right? And here's his abstract. Low carb, high fat diets can reverse obesity and type 2 diabetes, but there are still concerns that dietary fat contributes to heart disease. In this talk, we'll review the fuel utilization of the heart and demonstrate a clinical case study of reversal of heart failure with reduced ejection fraction. I have no idea what that means, but it sounds impressive.
It's just a fancy way of saying weakened heart.
Okay. Using a low carbohydrate ketogenic diet. It is known that cardiac muscle is mainly fueled by fatty acids and ketones, and that insulin resistance is considered an underlying cause of heart failure. Using a ketogenic diet to improve insulin resistance and lose weight may prove useful to treat individuals affected by heart failure and obesity.
You wanna hear something funny, Carl? We have a drug that's now first line in heart failure. Okay, they're called SGLT2 inhibitors. And do you want to know what they do?
Decrease insulin resistance?
They make you pee out sugar.
Whoa.
Our first line medication for heart failure now, particularly in diabetics, okay, literally make you pee out sugar. And every cardiologist and endocrinologist loves it. And when you ask them, hey, maybe we shouldn't put carbs and sugar in addition to helping people pee it out, they say that's crazy.
That's crazy.
That's crazy.
I gotta have my pizza.
Yeah, you gotta be able to, you know, put it in one way, take it out the other way, and but yeah. So this is a very interesting topic. In fact, about 5 years ago, I tried to get a trial up in the Yale system to demonstrate that a ketogenic diet could help. We were going to use remote scales to track water weight in heart failure patients. You know, very high tech, high touch intervention. But ultimately, I went into private practice because I'm, you know, as you alluded to before, that contrarian, you know, mindset that we see. So I never got to get that up and running in the academic world.
I have a side question about this drug that you're talking about. It sounds like it would be useful for type 2 diabetics as well.
Yeah, it's used in, it's probably second line now after metformin.
Because metformin makes you poop out sugar, right?
Makes you poop out sugar, correct. Yep. And it also improves insulin resistance. But the main thing, this wasn't known until like maybe 5 months ago, that it makes you poop out sugar. But yes, SGLT2 inhibitors are helpful in diabetes, but they do raise the chance of getting ketoacidosis. Just not much, but slightly.
So they're powerful.
They're powerful, and so you have to just be very careful. Like if you get nauseous or vomiting, like there is a chance that you could get keto even as a type 2 diabetic. So it's a great drug. We have better drugs for diabetes now than we did. But still, if mechanistically speaking, you know, there's other issues with it too. You can get urinary tract, right? If you make the sugar, if you make sugar go into the urine, what's going to happen? You're more likely to get infections in the urine. So there's some issues, but
so you probably have to drink water and maybe take less of it than you would if you were a heart disease patient, I'm guessing.
Yeah, no, you can still take a high dose. I think just being, you know, it just needs monitoring. Any and all drugs and therapies have side effects. You just need to be cognizant, monitor, and consider, you know, cost and benefit.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
All right. So the pièce de résistance.
Oh, my favorite. She is my hero.
And you got to wait till the end of, she's mine too. You got to wait till the end of the day because she's going on last. Nina Teicholz, Silencing the Science. This presentation will review the ways in which major advancements in the science on nutrition and health have been ignored by policymakers and government. We will review the updated science on saturated fats, the low-fat diet, dietary cholesterol, and low-carbohydrate diets, and examine how these advancements, let me say it again, and examine how these advancements have or have not been reflected in the policies of powerful public health institutions whose policies touch the lives of most Americans. We will also review new knowledge about powerful actors in this space, including big food and pharma, and how they influence our understanding of diet and health. This presentation will draw upon never before released data of emails and secret government reviews that have been obtained by requests under the Freedom of Information Act.
Okay, I want
That
to.
is juicy, man.
Oh,
Juicy.
beyond juicy. I want to segue right in because this is the most exciting talk for me. You know, I'm the conspiratorial guy. I'm the contrarian. You know, like a lot of people in this community, and I've talked a lot about how there are parallels in the nutritional public policy with you know, kind of the same errors that we've seen in the past with, you know, CDC responses, drug approvals. And so I think like this is one, I'm beyond excited for this, but I think it's a perfect segue to, hey, let's talk about the conspiratorial nature of low carb people. And let's talk about the, you know, contrarian thinking in the low carb community. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is it both? And help me. I wanted to open it up to you and hear your thoughts. And I know Amy feels strongly about this. So, you know, Amy, maybe you could chime in as well.
Sure. Well, yeah, I think this conspiratorial nature of some of the people in our community has served us really well, right? Like, for those of us who went to our doctors for years and years and followed the mainstream advice and followed the dietary guidelines, whether we knew we were following the guidelines or not, they would trickle down to our doctors and our dietitians and Weight Watchers and all that stuff. And I think, you know, questioning the status quo has really served us well. But I think it is really very interesting how it has changed over the last 2 years since COVID.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how I'm not well versed enough in the science of this to really speak to that piece of it. And, you know, but Tro and I have had offline conversations about it because he has opened my, you know, I live in a very, you know, in a part of the world that is very, you know, left leaning. And so Tro's really opens up my eyes to kind of consider other points, but I'm curious to hear, Carl, what your thinking is on it. And
Absolutely. So Richard Morris is my science guru. He is a biochemist now. And although I don't think people should be trusted just because they have initials after their name, I've always, you know, Richard has always been the one to find the papers, to find the research and share it and say, and back up his statements, you know, and ask for anyone to challenge it, you know, and on the Keto Dudes podcast, the Two Keto Dudes podcast, that's what we've done every single show. We've, you know, we say, if we said something wrong, something you don't agree with, send us an email. And, you know, we will show up in the errata section. You know, we misspoke about this or that. So we're always very careful about the claims that we made, and they were always based on science. And so during the pandemic, some people that we've even interviewed on our show, who we had a lot of trust in their opinions, started talking about, started giving opinions about vaccinations and about lockdowns and about all these things that were not proven nor disproven by science, but they took them as fact, you know, and what the few studies that they cited turned out, when Richard got a look at them, turned out to be bullshit. So we didn't know what to do. So at a point, we took a break because Richard went back to school. When he came back, we started doing a few more shows. And then this all happened. And on December 31st, 2021, we had show 224 called The Airing of Grievances. And so, we talk about Festivus because that's part of the Festivus thing. It's a Seinfeld airing of grievances, right? But also we talked about how disappointed we were, and this is why, and published links to the science that backed up what we think is good science, right? The science that backed up our positions. And so we basically said, we're drawing a line in the sand, and we are we're not going to change our lives based on hunches. It has to be based on sciences. It has to be based on science. And we showed that. In fact, anybody can go look and see the effects of vaccination on the world population. We don't have the situation that we had 2 years ago because of the vaccine. And every other country besides America can boast like 80% vaccination. You can quote me on this, Dr. Tro, or you can correct me. But
most of Europe is around 80%. South Africa is low. There's other countries that are low.
Right.
But most are around 80%. The definition has changed with being boosted.
Right.
So, and I think if you include boosted data now, it's less than 50% in the United States.
In the United States, right.
But it's probably around 75%. And then in like metro areas, it's upwards of 95%, which is where we live,
Yeah. So that's good. But anyway, we were just very disappointed with some of these people. We didn't call them out by name, but anyone who's been listening to us probably knows who they are. And it's very simple. If you're going to make a claim that urges me to change my behavior, you need to back that up with science. And the science has to be good. It can't be, I can't remember exactly, but one of them turned out to be written by a college student who was full of errors and full of plagiarism from different sources, and they were all BS. And this one study, I think it was the ivermectin study.
Oh, yeah. Ivermectin, you hit the nail on the head for me, because I saw very quickly that there's two sides, right? The one side is a lot of fraud came out all at once.
Yeah. Right.
You had Surgisphere, which was a phantom group who published data in the New England Journal, Lancet, and JAMA about the effects of hydroxychloroquine.
Right.
And it was completely falsified.
Right.
Right. And this was negative data. So when people saw this and figured out, hey, wait a second, this is a big fraud, they started, that conspiratorial nature really kicked in.
Right.
Even though there was not a lot of good data supporting hydroxychloroquine, it was really just mechanistic data, right? It wasn't, it wasn't strongly in favor. It's kind of like, should I use Tylenol? Maybe, probably, but we don't really know if it helps.
What are the risks versus the benefits?
Yeah. It's not a lot of risks, not a lot of benefit. And then if you looked at ivermectin, what happened was trial after trial came out, and there were small trials. Right. And then a group kind of did a meta-analysis eventually looking at everything. And if you poured through the individual trials, right, there's telltale signs of medical fraud, right? And people don't want to admit this.
Right.
One of them, for example, is, does the last digit of some of the lab values tend to run in zeros and fives, right? This sounds crazy, but if they run in zeros and fives, it means a human has fudged the numbers, right? So if there's not an equal statistical distribution of ending digits in lab values, right, it's most likely fraud. If you apply this basic litmus test to this meta-analysis supporting ivermectin, 1/3 of the trials are garbage, right? This is an easy litmus test. There should be an equal distribution of digits, from zero to 9, right?
Right.
Does that make sense? I don't know if it's easy enough, right? So the second litmus test any good doctor should use in evaluating a potential drug that relies on meta-analysis is, did the groups that had wildly positive data do a organized clinical trial? So if you look at the groups that had wildly positive data, okay, did they go on and say, I'm going to do a subsequent research on this because we got amazing results? Right. So like in my clinic, we observed certain things. We published it. How wouldn't I, as a doctor, go and publish more studies, which we've done, right? If you're actually interested in that field. So when you go back and you look at those publications, how many of the wildly positive trials had groups of researchers who did subsequent registration of trials, subsequent papers? Almost a fraction of them. So take all them and throw them out. That means, you have to assume it's an unregistered trial, which they largely were, and it was people just seeking fame and glory to publish a COVID, because it's not reliable data. You can look at it, but you can't completely trust it.
Right.
You can trust somebody. You're more likely to trust somebody who goes on and says, wait, I saw this great observation. I'm going to register a clinical trial. Or I saw this great observation. I'm going to publish another study. Right. So when you go to that meta-analysis, tons of fraud based on those digits. Right. And not a lot of people who've gone on for subsequent research. And when you look at some of the other wildly positive studies for ivermectin in those meta-analysis, it's like, an orthopedic resident in Bangladesh, who's never written on any virus ever, running a trial for, let's say iodine, or it's the only producer of ivermectin in Sri Lanka that sponsored a study, right? Like these are the types of studies that were wildly positive, just things that deserve a high degree of skepticism. Right. But, the tinge, so the tinge is the FDA is like, don't use horse paste. Right. And so when the FDA says don't use horse paste, I'm immediately like, what the hell? Like, why are they saying that? And then you go look at this and these other group of doctors, like this, compelling thing. They're saying, hey, look, there's this meta-analysis. It's so positive for ivermectin. The FDA is hiding things and so they take advantage of that. But if you still think critically,
you just got to think critically.
If you still think critically at that meta-analysis, it falls apart.
Right.
So a lot of people adopted ivermectin and were wildly positive of it and are still wildly positive of it. And I don't really think it ever worked. Right. It may have been slightly positive and not much harm, but it wasn't really all that helpful. But there was a huge sect of our contingency that was wildly positive of it. And while I appreciate their contrarian tone, like I love Ivor. I love his contrarian tone. But he was much more accepting of ivermectin than I was. Even my co-host, I love Brian to death. He's a smart doctor. Brilliant. Honestly, he's brilliant and he's affected my life in so many positive ways. I think he was just a little bit more, accepting of ivermectin than I was. And everybody has a different risk tolerance. Everybody has a different approach to medicine and it's an art. So I get it. I sympathize with their voices though. I personally think we need people like Ivor, even though I disagreed with him on a lot of different things. For example, I still think his voice is important. I don't know. What do you think? I'm crazy?
No, I don't think so. And I think it's in our nature to question things. But, you just have to make sure when you question things that you go to the right place for answers and you base it on science that's real. And, there are ways to tell, as you were saying, there are ways to tell, fake science from real science. So, yeah, I think as long as you're basing your actions on science, it's great to question. You have to question. In fact, the best science is done where the people who come out with their summaries and their conclusions publish it for peer review. So other peers have the chance to knock it down.
Oh, I wouldn't rely on that, right? All of those studies I just talked about were peer reviewed, right? So I think we need one step above that, right? Surgisphere was published in New England Journal, JAMA, Lancet, and they was retracted. right? That was the initial negative hydroxychloroquine data, which was literally fictitious.
Okay.
So I think it's.
So you have to look at who's doing the review, obviously. You have to look at where they're being paid, you know,
it's
who's
hard.
behind it. It is hard.
You know, imagine, you know what I noticed, Carl, and this is a topic dear to me, you know, so early on, right, I saw two sets of fearful emotional responses. And I'm going to present to you kind of the right-leaning side and the left-leaning side.
Okay.
Right-leaning side was, can you give me ivermectin, right? Right? Okay. You know, and the left-leaning side was, should I mix and match all my vaccine? You know, should I get my 5th shot?
Right.
Right. And the way I'm looking at it is these people are just scared.
Yeah.
They're just scared and they don't know what to do.
I mean, you know about the research about vitamin D, don't you?
Oh, absolutely.
COVID.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you really want to prevent yourself from getting hospitalized, take vitamin D. Like, there's real science that shows that, you know, people who take vitamin D are way less likely to be hospitalized, practically than those who aren't.
Look, I agree with you. I'm a big vitamin D supplement guy, but I'll tell you, the interventional data for vitamin D was never great. If you're deficient, you're more at risk.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
It's not a cure if you already have it.
You know, it's kind of like it's tough to do that. And then if you tell somebody to take vitamin D, is it giving them false hope? You know, I mean, we gave vitamin D ubiquitously.
Yeah, most people are deficient, right?
Yeah, so it's tough. I got to be honest with you. It's never been a tougher time to be a doctor.
I bet.
And it's never been a tougher time to be a patient.
Yeah.
You know, I think, but let's come back to the policy. I think what made it really tough, you know, here's the things I saw. And I'd love your opinion. You know, on one sense, you know, the mandates spurred people to really consider it. Social pressure, mandates, it made them consider vaccines if they were hesitant. The other side was, you know, there were COVID recovered young men who asked me if they needed to get shots to go to college, right? To get vaccines to go to college.
Right.
And this is tricky. When you deal with public policy, you know, their message is clear. Everybody over the age of 5 should get vaccinated and boosted. But when it comes down to the individual, I don't know what to tell that. I don't know what to tell that kid. You know, I don't know what the right answer is. You know, young men have a 1 in 5,000 rate of myocarditis, right? It's a low risk, you know, but it's a risk. So how do we prize the individual and the individual treatment and respect autonomy? And is, you know, kind of mandates, are they appropriate? What do you think? Because I know you guys recently reversed course, you know?
Reversed course?
On
Ketofest?
mandating a Ketofest, right?
Well, yeah. So we originally were saying proof of vaccination. That's it. You're not vaccinated, you're not coming to Ketofest. We got a little bit of pushback, but quite frankly, we're still getting pushback now that we've loosened it to proof of vaccination or proof of a negative rapid test within 24 hours. People are still complaining about that. And that's a small.
I mean, is it that hard to just swab yourself at the door?
I fly around the world. I had to get a negative test anytime I got on a plane. It's just the way it is. I mean, they do it at airports for free. You know, they do it at pharmacies for free. Not everywhere for free, of course. Here's what I learned. If you're flying to Europe and you're at Boston airport and you're thinking, oh, I'll just get tested at Boston. Yeah, it's going to be $250.
Holy crap. You're kidding me.
Insurance isn't going to pay for it.
Wow.
Yeah. But every other airport, everywhere else in Europe that I was at, it was free. Or the pharmacy. Free.
I think the rapid antigen tests are so ubiquitous now and inexpensive that it's an easy thing to do. You get results in 15 minutes. You'll know right away. You know, there are false negatives. And so there's a little bit of trust involved, but I think that's a pretty reasonable, a pretty
I
reasonable
think
approach.
so. And probably, I can't read the future, but probably if we do this again next year, it'll be over. I hope. And we won't need to do this. But there's still people getting infected. And while I'm not worried about somebody who's metabolically healthy coming to Ketofest and getting an infection, there are people who are not metabolically healthy that are coming to Ketofest. And
By default, all of us probably are like
Yeah.
have some degree of metabolic, compromise.
yeah, and so even if they could still get an infection, take it home to grandma who's 90 and and not metabolically healthy, infect them, and they're in the hospital. So
Yeah.
we just don't want people to get or spread COVID. It's not that it's a no-brainer for us. We have these very effective vaccines that are very low risk. As you pointed out, there is some risk, but very low risk. And the risk reward ratio, the reward to risk ratio is very high.
I think for most people who are metabolically compromised, which we know is roughly 80% of us in the United States, and certainly with older age, there's a very good case to vaccination. And I told you before we came on, there's a very good case for it. What's challenging as a doctor is how do I respect people's values?
Right.
And I have a lot of people like Tro, I had a 72-year-old lady we were talking about. She's like, Tro, I need more data. I'm not doing this,
Yeah.
And what do? I educate, and at the end of the day, I say, look, it's your body,
Right.
So it's been a challenge for me as a clinician.
So I would share the science with them, and say, we've computed the risk for you based on the science, and here it is.
Yeah, 30% mortality in that patient that I was, if you were to that particular patient we were talking about.
Right.
Yeah. So what did this whole kind of contrarian thinking, how did it change your perspective of our community? And to be honest, there was a huge hit to this quote unquote community beyond this, evolving contrarian thinking.
Yeah.
I actually appreciate the contrarian thinking. I
do too. It's built into our nature.
But I certainly see that we shouldn't put the blinders on. We should think critically about our critical thinking.
Right.
But
for the most part, the response for us after the airing of grievances was very, very positive. There was a lot of people who wrote us and said, thank you for voicing what nobody was talking about. That I thought I looked at all these people and I thought they had gone mad, and I thought maybe I was wrong about what I know and everything. And I'm really glad that you guys stuck up for science. And so I think a lot of people wrote us. I'm talking like 16, 17 comments or emails that we got that were like, thank you for doing that. Then there's always,
I got the opposite, Carl.
there's always the people that
Carl, I got the Tro, you're a crazy conspiracy theory, anti-vaxxer. I'm like, my parents are vaccinated, just because I haven't vaccinated my kids yet, are you really, so I got the backlash, which I don't think people hear, it's, when you're a little bit cautious on any new therapy, people, I got chastised, really for how I approached it. And ultimately, I think, it's very hard. People from within our community are like, Tro, I got called an embarrassment on my published study on LDL from Dayspring, but I have people in our community,
crazy.
But I have people in our community saying, Tro, you're an anti-vaxxer. I'm like, that's interesting. Amy, how many times have you heard me say?
All day. Yeah.
Get it. And then I think the flip side is I'm just respectful of people who say, I don't want it.
Right.
I'll show you the data,
I've heard you present the science, to just about every patient. The thing that's scary to me is, it's, first of all, as a patient, it's hard to know who to believe, right? As Like, it's hard to
That is
know
so
what
true.
to, like, I'm not going to read, I don't know how to read a paper necessarily. And I depend on experts to kind of interpret it for me. And it's hard to know from respected experts that, you know, people that I've respected before, it's hard to know who to believe. And so I think, yeah, I think it's difficult. It's difficult for doctors. It's difficult for patients to know what to believe.
I think people generally want to believe the CDC, right, and the FDA. Like, you want to believe your doctors.
Yeah.
Right? You want to believe his doctors. And I personally think you should question everybody, question yourself, question everybody, look at the data yourself, think about it, think it critically, talk about it, you know, and
here's another tip that, you know, there's people out there who will say, well, I don't trust the CDC because they changed their position. That's why you should trust them, because their position changes based on science. They're not running for political office, you know, and they flip-flop because they got paid from somebody or whatever.
Don't get me started on that, Carl.
Okay. But, you know, if you're an institution that's based on science and the new science comes out and you change your recommendations.
So let me, I'm going to tell you, the problem with public policy is they're almost never right. And it's so hard.
Yeah.
Right. It's so hard. Their job and the way they're programmed is, how do we help the most people?
Right.
Right. For example, in diabetes, they say diabetics should have, right now, the CDC's recommendation is your calories should be 50% carbohydrates.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, that's their recommendations, right?
They got that wrong.
So it's, I would say their job is hard. They're going to not be right for a lot of people. And you know, what I realized is, why do I disagree with the CDC so much? It's because our values are different, you know, and what the value system, which is a great system, it's let's protect as many people as it takes.
Right.
Okay. Some eggs are going to be broken. Values are going to be, you know, autonomy may be, you know, shifted towards more populism, and that's okay. That's their value set. And I think they have noble goals, right? I don't think somebody's evil at the CDC saying, let's tell people to have 50% carbohydrates. I'm sure if you ask them, they say, well, what we mean is high fibrous carbohydrates. We mean lettuce. And, you know, I'm sure they would say that, right? And I'm sure the people who said, you know, you're going to lose your job if you don't get vaccinated, they meant well, right? But I think what happens is there's an erosion of that doctor-patient relationship, and which is, and from my perspective, hard. It's hard to reconcile that. And there will be people, whatever public policy you make, that will be harmed, you know? And so I think it comes back to a different value set. You know, their value set is, let's try to help as many people as we can and just tell people what to do. They need direction. Right. And if we have to tell some little fibs here and there, we'll do it. Right. We'll do it. And, but the goal is a noble lie, you know. Vinay Prasad talked about a great article in The Atlantic about noble lies. It's hard, you know, it's hard to make sense of all this, but I don't think we can trust the CDC. I think you have to, you know, use them as an expert, but even experts you question, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it comes down to the science that's been done, right? As we said before. So that's what directs my actions. Isn't what the CDC says or Fauci says, it's the science.
Yeah, it's been a challenging time.
I know it has been, and I think it's going to get easier, you know.
Yeah, but I think it told us something about our community, which is,
well, that's true. Yeah.
You know, we are highly contrarian, and these are the risks that we need to evaluate. We're highly contrarian and less likely to check our own blinders.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
We're highly conspiratorial, and we're not likely to kind of reevaluate, you know, some of our, you know, we turned to ivermectin, this community turned to ivermectin with, you know, and it was a house of cards.
Yeah.
And a little bit of critical thinking would have said, you know, this won't work. This is not your savior.
Right.
But another blow to our community more recently is, Jimmy Moore.
Oh man.
And I don't think many people have talked about it, so we can talk about it now. I don't, he's still accused. And certainly, people are innocent till proven guilty, but those are some very serious allegations. And so
I don't know if anybody knows what you're talking about.
Jimmy Moore was, I think, recently accused of carnal knowledge. I didn't even know what it was. When I saw it posted on social media, I Googled carnal knowledge. It's
Sex with minors.
Yeah. Which is like just atrocious. So there's a lot of stains on this community. I don't know how we're going to wipe them off.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, here's what, you can't judge a community by one person. You can't judge science by one person. And you certainly can't, put all your eggs in one basket. And it's like, my wife won't go to Home Depot because once when she was at Home Depot, she was looking for a shovel and she was wandering around and some guy came up and said, "Oh, did you lose your husband?" And she boycotted Home Depot. Home Depot's a good store. That particular person was an a-hole, right? You should boycott the person, not the group or the whatever. We go to Lowe's now anyway, but that's neither here nor there.
No sponsorship, guys. Just
no.
That's a completely ethical.
But that's the whole thing. Is you'll take the advice of one person in the community because it feels good and it's kind of an easy answer, and then it turns out that they aren't what you thought they were. Doesn't mean you should ditch the whole thing. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And what they taught you may still have been good. But I feel that way about Jimmy. Like I listened to his podcast early on before anybody else had a keto podcast. He did, and he inspired a lot of people. You can't take that away from him. I mean, even if it turns out that these allegations are true, he still helped a lot of people. So
yeah, both can be true.
Both can be true at the same time.
True.
Yeah, I know. It's been a tough week. It's been a tough time. Amy jokes that nothing says low carb like conspiratorial thinking, Bitcoin, and what was the other one? I don't know, something like that. But it's look, ultimately, I love the contrarian side of us.
Yeah.
Right. But I agree that we need to, point that finger to ourselves sometimes.
Ask questions and, be very cautious about,
how am I wrong? Yeah.
Right.
How could, is it possible that I'm wrong?
Right. And be willing to be proven wrong. That's the other mark of a good science mind, is that, I'm saying this because this is what I currently believe in. Here's why, and the studies and blah, blah, blah. Somebody prove me wrong. And, we've taken people up on that challenge, and what they've provided was not compelling for evidence.
The thing that I find so scary is, and we've seen it a bit in politics over the last, I guess, 10 years or so, but the thing that I find scary in terms of this is in our various communities, our various camps, if you are not a scientist, you cannot even question it, right? It's without, no matter which side of the spectrum you're on, you can't even say like, well, maybe there is something here, right? Maybe it isn't for everybody. Maybe unilaterally deciding policy for everybody is not, and you can't even I made the mistake of questioning it at a party, and I was like, just
how dare you?
How dare you? Yeah, and I think everybody's facing that in their own worlds. You cannot even question.
In the keto world, I mean, even when I started, you guys know this, right? Your friends and your family are the first people to say, you're crazy. Why should I believe you, a musician, software developer, when my doctor says this?
Yeah, you're going to have a heart attack from all that butter.
Yeah, my doctor said you're wrong. And I'll say, well, your doctor's wrong. And they're like, they won't believe you. They're the first people to believe that you're nuts, that you're going to kill yourself.
Yeah.
I have to be honest with you. I'm very glad that you guys changed the policy to include, the pariahs like me. I haven't said this. I got COVID twice.
Yeah.
I have not yet decided to take the vaccine, and I don't tell most of my patients that. Many of my patients have obesity, diabetes, and I am highly encouraging of the vaccine. Right. And I tell them, there's always unknown unknowns. Right. And so I really appreciate you guys allowing me to take a negative test and be a part of it.
And I think that's smart anyway. Like, you should take a negative test before you come and when you get home. And that just makes sense to me, because if you picked it up at Ketofest, you don't want to give it to anybody else.
No, I don't. And I certainly have people in my family, and I think it's tough for people to understand that nuance. Like, I am very accepting of personal values and patient autonomy. I recommend the vaccine very often, and I think it's become less and less compelling as time has gone on. But, I don't know how many times Amy's heard me say, you have a 20 to 30% chance of dying.
Yeah.
The risks are high. The potential reward is through the roof.
Just get
and I think it's tough for people to understand. Well, he didn't take it.
Yeah. Right.
And yet he recommends it. But he hasn't, so I appreciate.
But you're metabolically healthy. Like you're not in the high risk category, right?
Yeah. And I think the really what makes me, at this point, a little bit, I can really evaluate the data as I've had it twice,
right?
And so for me, it's a personal decision, and I appreciate the fact that you guys have opened up Ketofest to people like me. So I just wanted to tell you that I'm excited to go. I'm excited to be a part of it.
We're excited to have you.
Yeah, absolutely.
There was something else that I wanted. Oh yeah, I know what I wanted to tell you. Do you know who Faith Middleton is?
Faith Middleton? Nope.
So she was for years on Connecticut Public Radio, and she did a show called The Food Schmooze, which was her and 3 other guys just sitting around talking about recipes. And oh, that sounds delicious, right? A food radio show. So she is no longer at Connecticut Public Radio, and she wanted, they just had to continue somehow, but they didn't have a show. So they recorded podcasts. They recorded about 30 of them. I don't know what it's called, but they haven't published them. So you're looking at the new producer of Faith Middleton's new
That's awesome, man.
show.
That's awesome.
Not only that, but when I met her online just a few days ago to talk about it, she says, I just started keto.
That's awesome.
Like, wow, how cool is that? And she knows Robert Ramsey from RD86 for Ketofest is going to be. So like, we just blew her mind. Like, Two Keto Dudes, Ketofest. She's going to come down, right?
All she needs now is to buy some Bitcoin. Yeah. And then the trilogy will be complete.
Yeah. So
takeover.
Yeah, I can't wait for Ketofest. This has been awesome. Carl, I know you have to go. Amy, I know we have to go. So let's give everybody some parting words. Amy, I'll let you start. Any parting words?
Yeah, thank you again for getting Ketofest off the ground again. It's a great event. And for anybody that hasn't listened to the Two Keto Dudes podcasts, go back. It is a treasure trove of information, and it helped get me started on my journey. And so, yeah, thank you. I can't wait for July. Is it July 16th?
16th. Yeah, there's an all access pass that includes a VIP party on Friday the 15th. And I just want to mention for you New York listeners, Amtrak goes right to New London, and it's 2 blocks from the train station. So it's right there. There's no excuse.
It's going to be fun. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
Carl, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.